Does cash have a future, or will paper money will be washed out by e-payments? The financial world is bubbling up with heated debates on the 21st century payments landscape. And here today at the sidelines of the currency conference, we have its chairman and mm, founder of the currency research, Richard HAYCOCK, to share his views on these issues. So, welcome, Mr. Richard HAYCOCK.
Thank you.
So, we really appreciate that you agreed to give us this interview. So, the first question. So, at the opening of the currency conference, you brought to my mind an interesting analogy between cash and horses. So, did I get it right that in the distant future, cash will be marginalized by digital payments, by digital money, as like at the beginning of the 20th century, horse transportation was ousted by engine vehicles?
Well, you're correct that I used that analogy between cash and horses. And the point was that the people in the room needed to recognize that we will see, I believe, a steady decline over time of cash usage as the electronics payment system and the digital payments, if you will, come up. But the second point to that was that 100 years later, there are still horses being used for transportation, and that there is still over 10 million horses in the United States alone. So that it is not a falling off the cliff scenario that suddenly cash will go and disappear, that 100 years from now, there will still be cash used in transactional use and used in stored value use. So it's both a good news and a bad news scenario, and let's prepare for the future, but let's not get too overly concerned that in my lifetime or even in your lifetime, that cash will suddenly drop off a cliff.
Okay, so I think we will have to adapt to the new reality of digital payments, but the paper money, they hopefully will remain in our wallets. So monetary reforms go all the way back to the earliest day of our civilization. So we couldn't deny that these changes were driven by multiple factors. One of them is economic development of each country. So neither could we stop scientific and technological progress that brings a lot of innovation to cash. So do you think that cash and cashless payments, could they substitute each other? Do they serve a good example of harmony?
Again, I'll go back to the horse analogy, in that in New York City, for example, today they use horses to patrol the parks in New York City. While they have automobiles, while they have trains, while they have airplanes and other means of transportation. So there's no doubt that cash will remain, and it will remain a strong and viable part of the economy and the payments landscape. It will coexist with the other forms of payment, and also in the world there are multiple different countries in different stages of development. So what might be appropriate for a country in one stage of development and a small country with, for an example, Singapore or Sweden, wouldn't necessarily work in this time frame for a country like India or a country like South Africa.
Oh, this moves us forward to the next question. As was said in the conference, 40% of the population on the globe still remains hopefully or unhopefully unbanked. So, what do you think? What solutions the currency industry could bring to those people?
I think the best example of that is actually M-Pesa in Kenya. And people look at M-Pesa and say this is a mobile payments network. Well, in fact, M-Pesa is facilitating financial inclusion. The numbers in Kenya for the last 10 years of about the people who have become involved in the financial world is growing on a very steady basis. But what that actually does for them is gives them access to cash. And so the growth of cash in Kenya has also increased dramatically. So I think financial inclusion is about cash. It's about access to cash, and that the regular commercial banks don't see a profit in giving financial inclusion to the people who can least afford it. So it is going to be the mobile telecommunication companies. It's going to be an M-Pesa type of situation, which will facilitate getting cash to people so that they can use that cash to pass it to somebody else or to a retailer and pass it back into their mobile account.
Okay, so and let's move forward to the question of cryptocurrency. Now we have seen a number of cases when even central banks, they are deciding to shift to cryptocurrency. We have an example of the Central Bank of Ecuador, and of course the People's Bank of China that is edging closer to issuance of its own cryptocurrency. So what prospects for this type of digital money do you see?
Well, first of all, I would correct that the Bank of Ecuador has not shifted towards cryptocurrency. What the Bank of Ecuador has done is shifted towards a country debit card with without using the Visas and the MasterCards and the commercial banks, and said that we are going to make that affordable for everyone, and we're going to bring the charges for a country debit card, in effect, down to a 0.01% or 0.01 cent type of charge. And so they haven't actually issued any new money. They haven't actually issued anything digital. What they have done is reduce the charges for people to get money and to get their own money and to spend money in the country. It's more, I would categorize the Ecuadorian situation as more stored value card. And we may see that more in the central bank world, to the detriment of MasterCard and Visa, but not necessarily to the detriment of cash. In cryptocurrencies, I think in the world we have heard everywhere that from a convenience, from a security point of view, it's not where it needs to be in order to replace cash or even to replace the currency of a country. So I think central banks will continue to study this, will continue to learn what is happening, will allow the commercial world to develop their own cryptocurrencies, their own algorithms and mechanisms. And then at some point in time, they will decide whether it's for them or not. And if it is for them, they will look and say, well, this one is the one that seems to be now the standard in the world. So we will make an agreement with that company. We will nationalize that company in our country. We will move to that. But I think that is decades away.
Okay, so you know, when we are speaking about digital technologies and breakthrough innovations, we could just imagine that cash, paper money, they will have to adapt to it. So could you just imagine what future banknotes may be like? How could you imagine a digital paper money, if I could say so? And will it lose its anonymity if it will be adapted to digital technologies?
Okay. Good question, but the question is more future. You know, are we talking 500 years in the future? Are we talking 20 years in the future? Are we talking 5 years in the future? Because I think if we are talking even 20 years in the future, we can have the same exact conversation 20 years in the future. that cash will still be a very viable, important part of the economy, and digital currency will still not be where it needs to be an issuable currency. So, talking 50 or 100 years in the future, I will point to horses, and that they are still used in the transportation industry. They haven't really changed all that much in the last 100 years. I think cash will still be used. It might be slightly different. It might have wonderful new features, of course. Maybe electronic features in the currency. I think if you want the holy grail of the industry, is a banknote that is good at the point of sale and then turns off, and then is re-turned on at the commercial bank level, and then reissued, or the commercial bank or the central bank, and then reissued, so that there is no risk of theft, there's no risk of armed vehicles being attacked. It's simply a piece of paper that is transferred. I think we might see that in 25, 50 years. And we may see something that isn't actually paper.
So interesting. Let's wait and see. So, Richard, Currency Research is a well-known international organization that brings together leading experts from the currency industry, from central banks, to discuss all these issues on cash management, on cash cycle, on the innovation in banknote industry. So it hosts a number of events like cash seminars, banknote conference, and the currency conference. So could you share with us what secret recipe do you have about the currency conference in your cuisine?
Very interesting question. I think, first of all, we have just celebrated 25 years of holding the currency conference. So we were the first conference, major conference, to bring together central banks from all around the world. We have had tremendous relationships with the central banks, again, all around the world, and with the supply industry. So I think our recipe is quite simple. We bring together the most interesting speakers, we bring together the industry sponsors, and we allow the opening up of the industry with the central banks. But in a secure environment for both the sponsors and the central banks to talk and interchange.
Okay, so if we're talking about this particular conference, what was the most thing that impressed you during this conference?
I think in this particular conference, we are mostly talking about and have accepted that the future of cash is both necessary and going to be around, but it might be a changing industry. And it will not surprise this industry that the amount of cash in circulation will decrease over time. And so I think everyone in the industry is trying to understand what that means for them as a business and what that means for them as a central bank.
Okay, Richard, thank you for this conversation and that you have agreed to give us the interview. So we really appreciate this opportunity to talk with such a professional as you are. So once again, thank you for this talk.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.